two mantras, or teachings, if you will, that guide nearly every decision that I make. One I have had and carried with me for a long time, and we just sang it. I must answer yes to life. The second I encountered just a few years ago. It comes from the Quakers, and it was introduced to me by one of my advisors in my doctoral program. The Quakers have a saying, perhaps some of you have heard it, proceed as way opens. As soon as I encountered the phrase, I was deeply irritated by it. And so I knew it had truth to tell me. I wrote it down in a planner 3 years ago, and every year when I get the new planner, I rewrite it once more, right at the beginning, where I can't miss it. For this past week, my family had planned a small Thanksgiving with just the kids and some friends. Then I got a call from the daughter of the leader of the Apache stronghold, Vanessa. Her father was beginning his pilgrimage from the reservation to their sacred ancestral homeland of Oak Flat, and he was beginning the journey on Thanksgiving. Wensler and other members of the Apache tribe are taking up residence on the land in an attempt to stop the copper mining company that is moving in, a company that will replace the sacred land of Oak Flat with a 2-mile crater. A couple of faith leaders I knew, including Dr. Barber and Reverend John Mendez from North Carolina, were going. I didn't even consider it, though I promised Vanessa I would offer what support I could and make a few phone calls to colleagues that I knew. I told my spouse, Anne Marie, about what was going on. And before I could finish the story, she said, "You're going, of course." What? 3 of your 4 children have no idea what day today is, right? Recognizing the truth in her words, we changed our plans. Now, here's the thing that might not seem apparent to me about me. I like my plans. I'm not opposed to change, but I like to make plans and to stick with them. In that planner that I dutifully map things out in, I even have lists of to-do items. And I have a system of check marks that I give when something is complete. But I've discovered over the years that there are some tasks, though I put them down for a particular week, beyond my control, cannot be completed in that week. And so I've devised a separate system of checklists for the tasks that must be carried on to another time to ensure that I still feel as if I've completed it. Are you following me? Some might call this neurotic. I call it plan. While on the plane with terrible turbulence and an extra 1.5-hour travel to reroute us around the massive storm, I began to question my decision. And the poetry of Billy Collins came to me. Proceed as way opens. Proceed as way opens. I arrived in Phoenix on Wednesday at 11:30 p.m. local time. I went to check into my hotel only to discover that one in my group had accidentally checked into my room and had both sets of keys for the only other empty room in the hotel. After calling her for about 30 minutes, I finally got her on the phone, met her in the hallway, got my keys, went to my room. I checked my text messages just to ensure that the last text message I had said that the car that would take us to the reservation was leaving Phoenix at 7 a.m. 7 a.m. So I set my alarm to 5:30 a.m. local time, knowing that'll give me plenty of time to sip some coffee, to catch up on the news, to ponder the meaning of life, and still take a shower. However, when I wake up at 5:30 a.m., I discover I have 10 phone calls that I have missed and several text messages. They begin with, "Where are you?" So I call one in our group, only to learn that the night before, Wenzler had felt that he needed to start earlier, and the car was moved back to depart at 4:30 a.m.
Oh, jeez.
Everyone had left without me. So we determined that the most sensible thing is to see if I can get a lift to take me as far as I can get, and then someone will send a car back. It seems like a wild idea, and I can't imagine on Thanksgiving Day that there's any Lyft driver who's going to reply yes to my request at 5:35 a.m. But nonetheless, one says yes. I put in a destination somewhere near where I know the reservation is. It's about a 2.5-hour drive into the mountains. I'm shocked when the driver pulls up at 5:50 a.m. I slide into the car and I give a long explanation of where we're going and why I don't have an exact address and what has happened. And at the end of about a 4-minute explanation, the driver just looks perplexed. That is when I determine, after a brief exchange, that his English is about as good as my Spanish, which means we will be able to discuss the location of bathrooms and whether I have the amoebas. So he looks at me and he points toward the mountains and asks, "Drive?" "Sí." Enrique and I head into the desert. We say yes to life at 5:52 a.m. When we get into town, if one can call it a town, I point to a cafe and instruct him that he can leave me there. The tribal leaders will send a car to meet me and then bring me to wherever they are. There's no way to put in the GPS, the location where we're meeting. It's just at dawn, and Enrique looks warily at me as he unlocks the doors. It's deserted. There's nothing but a few stray dogs wandering in the streets. "It's okay. See, I'll be okay." And I step out of the car. He drives away. And that's when the wind picks up and begins to blow through the town, and I notice the circle of ravens overhead. I send the text message that I'm where I would be when I said I would be there. They can't be more than 20 minutes away, I tell myself. And I go to enter into the cafe, realizing all too late that it's Thanksgiving. And it's not even 10 a.m., and the doors are locked. Every building is locked. Proceed as way opens. Proceed as way opens. An hour passes. I call my contact, but I can't get anyone. I call 10 people, and each phone goes immediately to voicemail. Proceed as way opens. It's then that Anne-Marie calls me. They have decided to eat the lasagna that I have made the night before a little early, and she tells me it's delicious. I say goodbye. I can't bear the thought that my last conversation will be about lasagna. I begin to pace, and then from worried I get angry when a car approaches and someone waves at me, and I am just absolutely relieved as I run toward the car saying, "I'm so glad to see you." And that's when I realize that the driver seems to have already begun enjoying the festivities.
Oh, dear.
And he says, "Hey, baby." And I realize this is not my ride. I run back to the cafe, sit on the cold concrete slab. My phone now has 10% battery charge. This is the moment when I wonder if I should compose last words. Ceremonialize the moment as one of the stray dogs comes up, sits beside me, and starts whining. An hour passes, when at last I get a text. We're on our way, white Kia in Ultima. That exact car pulls up just a minute later. What good grace, I think. And as I approach the car, the woman inside smiles, but when I go to reach for the passenger side door, she looks alarmed and hits the locks. I saw you here an hour ago. I just wanted to see if you were okay. Not my ride. You cannot make this story up. There was another white Kia Altima just driving through, checking on me. 20 minutes later, I get into the right car. We get breakfast, a good decision. I learn that they have already gone through all of the prayers and rituals before sunrise, and of course I recall that the practice is that all electronics during the rituals must be turned off. So no one even knew I was where I was. Dr. Barber turns to me and asks, "How are you doing?" Well, I said, the theme for Sunday is the unexpected. Well, you got a sermon. After breakfast, we end up returning to the group. And Wensler starts teaching about time, that we are where we are supposed to be as we are. I look up, not convinced just yet. That's when he points to an eagle that has been following the group all morning. And Yara Allen, the singer and movement leader, steps forward into the circle and begins to sing this line, the words to which are, "Walk with me, Lord, on this tedious journey. Walk with me." Prayers are offered, a ritual with sage and eagle feathers. And we are taught a lesson in time. The group continues on for the next step in the journey. Proceed as way opens. How we deal with the unexpected shapes our lives. It is rarely the planned elements on the to-do list that end up being the story of who we are in the world. Ask nearly anyone for a defining story of their life, and they will tell you something that they had not initially planned for, or something that went different than they expected. Sometimes tales of great sorrow along incredible, unbelievable fortune. Most often, we find our lives, even if we are type A neurotic list checkers, to be born, to be birthed in the places we did not anticipate. A quick poll. For those of you who are currently working, if you are currently working in a job that matches exactly what you thought you would be doing at 18 years of age, would you raise your hand?
Oh, we've got a couple.
Ira Glass recently shared on the radio, there's a story by the fiction writer Ron Carlson in which a guy loses his job after 10 years at the job. His boss tells him, "Okay, go to plan B." And the guy says, "This was plan B." Which is, I think, how it goes for most of us. We head off cheerfully toward plan A, but plan A turns out to be completely different than what we thought it was going to be. And so we switch to a backup, and then the backup plan becomes our life. A while back, Glass shares, I was giving a talk to about 100 people. And knowing I was going to be talking about this on the radio, I asked them to remember back to when they first hit adulthood. What is it that they thought their lives would be like? What was their plan A? And I asked them, okay, how many of you are still on plan A? Out of 100 people, only one person raised her hand. Just one. The youngest person in the room, 23 years old. Everybody else in the room was like, plan B? What about C, D, and F? Our lives are told in the tales of the responses we have to the unexpected. Parker Palmer famously tells a metaphor of in the Midwest during a great storm, a blizzard, that there was a practice among farmers, right, to tie a rope, I've shared this with you before, from the barn to the house, so that if you were out by the barn, out in the field, and the storm suddenly came up and there was zero visibility, you'd be able to find your way back to the house. Farmers had frozen to death because they had gotten disoriented in space and not been able to find their way back. So Palmer uses the story as an illustration, right? What is the rope? Right? It's a metaphor. I used to think, when I was very young, that the rope were what we believed, our values. A long time ago, I sought out the beliefs that would bring home to me my deepest self and centered purpose, but I never found that actually to be the rope. Then I thought perhaps the rope is a still small voice, our conscience, our intuiting what is right. There are times when the wind howls and the ravens circle and you can't hear that voice anymore. At last I concluded the rope was community. But I have learned that community herself changes. Even love changes. Finally, I believe now that the rope in the story is change herself. The thing that brings us back to the home of our soul is change. Can we move forward enough to take the next grip? A constant gripping, release. Gripping, release. Communities of resilience do this, taking hold and releasing again and again and again. Neither position can be held forever. Communities that take hold of their history as surely as they release them to embrace the new story are the ones that survive and thrive. Proceed as way opens. In the 1980s, in the height of the AIDS epidemic, St. Vincent's Hospital in New York City became one of the centers for treatment for those with HIV and AIDS. But initially, like the Catholic Church at the time, which was their primary funder, the hospital refused to instruct people to use condoms or to face the disease with education and adequate responsiveness. A group called ACT UP was leading protests throughout the New York City area. In fact, one Sunday they disrupted the Cardinal's homily by doing a die-in. St. Vincent's was also the site of protests. On one day, protesters, activists came into the hospital and began to place condoms on the statues, including a statue of Jesus. The police were called to the hospital, and there they met with one of the Sisters of Charity, Sister Karen Heffenstein, who was kind of the director on site at the time. And she was asked, do you want to press charges? The activists had all been arrested. She waved off the officers. Take the cuffs off them, please, she said. Come here. And she gathered everyone into a conference room. I want to understand what you need, Sister Karen said. I want to understand how we can do better. St. Vincent's would become one of the central places that those diagnosed with HIV/AIDS would go to and the Sisters of Charity would transform the care that they offered patients. And in turn, hospitals across the country were inspired to do likewise. Mark Twain writes, "That is the way with us. We may go on half of our life not knowing such a thing is in us, when reality, it was there all the time. And all we needed was something to turn up that would call for it. Our world is filled with fast-paced, unexpected change, and this is likely to accelerate for the foreseeable forecast. And yet we can still say yes to life, to change itself, to the next pull on the rope toward the home within us, the call of who we yet can be." While I was in Oak Flat, my friend who we had invited for Thanksgiving but who had to cancel texted me and said, "Is there any chance we could get together tomorrow?" "Sure," I said. "I'm actually in Arizona and we're doing Thanksgiving tomorrow." There we were the very next day. 2 teenagers, 4 adults, 2 sets of twins, one at 5 years old and one at 6 months old, an 18-month-old and 1 3-year-old. You can envision the rest. Ella looked at me while I was finishing up the gravy. "Why weren't you here, honey, for Thanksgiving?" I was surprised she knew what day it was. "Well, something unexpected came up. I had to go be with some friends, the Apache Stronghold." I had told her about the Apache Stronghold before. Without missing a beat, Ella responded, "Unexpected means change, but you're here now." So I am. So we are. Proceed, beloved, as way opens. Say yes to life. Say yes to truth. Say yes to love, and I believe we will collectively say yes to who we yet can be together.